Hey guys, what's up? You're tuning into the EXO podcast with your host here, Lizzy Jane. Today we have a very special guest on the show, color-based melodic dubstep extraordinaire Chime. Harvey, thank you so much for coming on. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for
Good.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I greatly appreciate it. What time is it? You're in England, correct?
Yeah, it's 8:36
8:30. Okay, so not
p.m.
too late. Not like
Yeah, no, it's
anything
fine.
crazy.
hmm
So I'll just kind of like dive straight in. As we were talking before this, melodic dubstep isn't new. It's been around for decades, since really the beginning of electronic dance music. But I really want to say that this amplified color-based genre that you've really predominantly platformed into the stratosphere of EDM is now getting the traction and kind of momentum that it's never had from an outsider's point of view. Like, how do you feel about that? Are you happy you've got all these consumers and fans and kids who are now like, holy shit, this is great. Like, this is a great piece of music.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very very happy to see the melodic side of things kind of pick up again.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I mean, when I first got into dubstep around kind of 2011, 12, everything was melodic.
Yeah.
Everything had to have kind of tonality to it. And with the like early UK wobbly stuff, there was
Mm-hmm.
there was always some kind of like
I feel like that's
color
when like
going on.
Flux Pavilion was really like at
Mm.
the forefront of a lot of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it started off as kind of simple, just kind of bass patterns, and then yeah, Flux and with his kind of chords, big old super saw chords.
Yeah.
Really kind of brought a lot of attention to the more melodic side. Also, artists like Gemini and Subscape, those kind of guys.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
Subscape. Great.
when Skrillex came along, it was such a clash between his kind of melodic intros into more heavy drops. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, like the drops were still just caked in
Very
in melody.
tonal. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
Um, so yeah, we've kind of seen that drop off in the past like 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Things have been getting just like I think people have started to think that heavy means atonal, but that's
Yeah,
not necessarily the case, right?
correct.
So yeah, and we've seen a lot of artists like Virtual Riot and Must Die kind of tone down some of their more melodic sides.
Mm-hmm. Which
So
now I'm seeing starting to come back through their music
yeah,
for alternative projects.
yeah, so I've been kind of trying to keep it alive really throughout these years and give those listeners that are kind of wanting that more melodic sound, keeping them busy.
I mean, definitely. I mean, I remember the first time I listened to your music. I feel like you have a very, specific, you cater to a very specific subgenre, but the people who love it and are like
Hmm.
obsessed with it. And I feel like it's created this very almost like, I don't know if cultish is the right word, but people who just die for the kind of music that you've kept pushing forward and have then turned on to your label Rushdown and found other kind of gems in the rough who are creating this very colorful bass music.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, I think a lot of artists were told or got the impression that they couldn't really do both. They
Mm-hmm.
had to either go down the
Oh,
heavy
that's such a
headbanger
lie.
route. Well, yeah, or go to the melodic side and work more on like streams and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and there's kind of been a lot of pressure on producers to do that. Because the heavy stuff has such an obvious appeal.
Yeah.
You see people headbanging, you're like, okay, that's fun, that's
Yeah.
great, that goes well at shows. And the more melodic stuff, I guess you could point to like Seven Lions and Millennium,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of like more emotional, big kind of super soul
But
rich
you never see the
tunes.
intertwine of both of those. It's like one side or
Yeah,
the other.
well, there used to be so much going on in that void in between.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, now that like everyone's kind of been pushed to the sides, there's just all of this interesting stuff that we can do in the middle. And
Absolutely.
with kind of rhythm gaining popularity, the kind of more simplistic flow and just kind of getting into the groove of a certain bass pattern combining that with tonality and chords and more melodic elements has become a really kind of fresh take on this kind
Absolutely.
of center point. Yeah, I mean, color bass in general refers to anything in the middle, really.
Hmm.
Yeah, and really, it was kind of to get away from, when you say melodic dubstep, I think a lot of people think of like Seven Lions and Millennium, that kind of just all the way melodic, just chords,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Whereas color bass, there's just so many different flavors to that. I would call like early Skrillex color bass. I would call
Hmm.
early Zomboy color bass, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's really the idea with it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank you for kind of like breaking that down. I've always kind of looked at it as intelligent dubstep, quote unquote, because it's so intriguing to the ear when you've listened to bass music for so long. You know, the structure is very similar because ultimately it's like, okay, you want to play this live. So every DJ has to follow that build structure into the drop structure. And when I started listening to more down the lines of the music that you create, it did follow that structure, but for the first time it was like there were so many different moving parts. Instead of it just being 2D, it's like 3D or 4D, and with the arps and with the layers that you add, it's just very, very interesting, intriguing music. And I think during quarantine, more than anything, since shows pretty much have been thrown into a halt, people want to listen to music that they can listen to through the house and in the
Hmm.
car, or just hanging out, and I feel like it's full bodies of music instead of just a drop.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it really encapsulates the two sides. Like, melodic music is always done better in terms of streaming,
Hmm.
and the heavier side, artists that make that are more likely to get booked for shows and stuff. But it's interesting when you mention the 2D 3D aspect, because that's kind of how I look at the kind of difference between
Hmm.
the atonal stuff and tonality.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do with atonal, just purely big, scrapey, heavy tunes, right?
And you always have that in your music too. Like you do always have that atonal aspect of it. I feel like that's
Yeah.
in the foundation.
But yeah, if you think about it, like on a piano roll, you're only playing with like one note or like a
Hmm.
couple of notes.
Yep.
So in effect, it is like two-dimensional. So when you start introducing harmony and different chord structures and all that sort of thing, it opens up another dimension, up and down in
Absolutely.
pitch. So that's personally why I find more melodic stuff more enjoyable. There's kind of more to dig into. Um, yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't like atonal stuff as well. Like, there's so many
I
people
feel like
making.
both have its like very strong points and places where it's kind of like right time, right place.
Mm.
So before, see, but you say that atonal, okay, like you're gonna get booked for shows more if you just do the heavy stuff and the headbanging stuff. But you just played a primetime spot on Couchlands and you played Lost Lands last year. So I feel like there is something in the air coming where this kind of music is starting to get a bit more attention and a bit more demand from a fan standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of pleasantly surprised that I've been able to get to the point that I have with my music, because
Mhm.
kind of when I first started touring the US, I thought I'd get quite a negative reaction almost, because it was back in 2017 when I think the heavier stuff was really.
So was that your first time to the States?
I visited before. I came in 2015,
Okay.
just for a trip,
Mhm.
but yeah, the first tour was the fall of 2017. Yeah, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised that people would really enjoy the kind
Receptive
of
to it.
more musical stuff. Yeah, and really, that's what color bass is about. Is it's making tunes that go really well in a live experience, but still have that color to it.
Absolutely. Was that like an independent tour? Were you touring as support for anyone?
Yeah, it was support for Terra Vita.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Disciple
yes,
boys.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now they are, of course. Um, yeah, it was Terra Vita and Riot and me. Um,
Oh.
but that was really beneficial because I was really like a very small artist at that point,
Hmm.
as far as like the US was concerned. So um, by me being on that tour, I got to go to places that I wouldn't have made it to on my own. Um,
Absolutely. It like put you on the map from a standpoint from a stateside as well, I'm sure.
yeah, and that meant I could come back early 2018 for my own tour, and then just kind of go from there, really. So yeah, that was really beneficial, and I met a lot of the promoters that I continued to book me after that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a really good start.
That's awesome. So before COVID, like around the time when you came to the States in 2017, how does the electronic dance music scene look over in England and in the UK and over throughout Europe? Because I've never really gotten that standpoint. Like I've talked to Modestep and a few of the boys about it, but I've never really gotten like an in-depth like, yeah, it just doesn't compare to over here because I feel like there's some stronger points and other subgenres like drum and bass that have a stronger threshold over there than in the States.
Yeah, drum and bass is definitely heavily preferred in
Hmm.
across Europe, I'd say. Um, yeah, I think just because it's been around longer, and there's kind of a bit of a taboo with dubstep. I think because it's quite an obnoxious
Yeah.
genre. It's quite
Hmm.
in your face. So it's kind of like Marmite. You know, you either are gonna love it or you hate it. I
Yeah.
realize that you're not gonna know Marmite. Surely you
No,
know of Marmite in the
absolutely
US.
not.
All right, well that's a completely terrible
Oh,
reference.
no, no, no. Wait, it's artist, I assume.
No,
No.
Marmite is you spread it on toast, and
Oh,
it's
no.
terrible. But some people love it.
Oh. Okay, but
Um,
but it's a good analogy. I get it now. Now everybody will get it because he told us. But there's
um,
events like Rampage and stuff that are just
mm,
like insane. That debatably blow most bass events here out of the water.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that is surprising. I think the only way they can make that work is because it has a heavy drum and bass element to it as
That
well.
matches.
I think if it was fully dubstep, they wouldn't be able to hit the numbers they do.
Hmm.
Specifically in the UK, um, I mean, dubstep is possibly the deadest it's ever been, really.
Really?
Um, yeah, I think a lot of people here are quite elitist with their music taste, and so I think a lot of people feel that the Americans came along, took dubstep, turned it into something else, and ruined it effectively.
We ruin most
Although,
things. It's okay.
although to be honest, that's when I got interested in dubstep really when it
Hmm.
was being Americanized.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but because it started here and it was something so different to what it is now, um, yeah, people are kind of a bit salty about that.
I listened to
Yeah.
like the early days with like Scream and even
Mm,
beforehand. And it's just everything from, obviously as time goes on, VSTs become better. There's new techniques for mixing and mastering and producing in general. But it's like that organic sound where dubstep started is just amazing to see the progression in really just such a short amount of time to what it is today.
yeah, I mean, it was completely different. It
Hmm.
was, there were some tracks that were just drums and a sub bass. Yeah, before it
Yeah.
even got like wobbly or like kind of
Yeah,
bassy in any way
absolutely.
that we know now. So yeah, I think also like the UK had a point where the dubstep scene made its way into the mainstream. We had a couple of like radio like big dubstep hits like
Really.
louder by DJ Fresh,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
a
I
couple of
play that
Chase
in
and
my
Status
sets.
tunes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I play an edit of
Um,
that in my sets. Done.
yeah, to the point where like Bass Cannon by Flux Pavilion was like played on Radio One here. It was
Which
it
is
was just a crazy
crazy.
time.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. I feel like that still wouldn't even happen in the States today on like
Mm,
primetime radio to a certain standpoint. But you're starting to see hip hop artists and pop artists like Billie Eilish or Megan Stallion and Travis Scott like look for those EDM influenced beats and not just the regular hip hop 808 beats. And it's very
yeah.
intriguing.
Well, that was unfortunately I think part of the downfall in the UK because um, pop artists started dipping into dubstep because it was gaining some level of like radio popularity.
Hmm.
So we ended up with like, what was that tune? It was Hello Kitty. I think it was by Avril Lavigne or
Oh
something.
boy. Oh boy.
That had like an appalling dubstep drop halfway through it. Um,
That was it.
yeah,
Kay
and
was like,
there
I'm
were
out.
just there were a couple of those kind of things where pop artists just did a terrible impression of dubstep, and it gave it a
Ugh.
really bad name.
Yeah,
There were a couple of tunes where there were like artists like Example that were produced by like Subfocus and Nero and Feed Me,
which is
um,
awesome.
and there was even a point where like there was such a like a connection between bass music and pop, where like Rob Swire from Pendulum was producing for Rihanna. There's like Rihanna tunes that are
Which
produced
is
by him,
crazy. It's
which
like
is
if
yeah.
you look at the credits on the back of, an album or a single, or just in the bottom of this discography, to see how many names are on that is just crazy. I think Bleep Bloop and Madeon were just on Lady Gaga's new album, which is
Oh,
just
interesting.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Out of all people, Bleep Bloop. And you're just like, whoa, like holy crap. And got, credits on, I believe, Flume's album as well. But it's
Hmm.
just so cool to see those kind of people kind of dabble in other things, just how, like your songs appear in video games and stuff like that. It's like the crossover is very real from a producer standpoint that works in this genre of electronic music.
Hmm.
So you said that you started producing in 2011, correct? That's when you kind of got into the scene.
Yeah. I mean, I I kind of started by, I mean, literally just opening GarageBand
Yeah.
on a hand-me-down MacBook I got.
Yep. Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
literally just like opening all the applications and seeing what they were because I was just excited to have a laptop.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I just kind of started messing around with loops. Really, I had no connection to music, particularly, other than the kind of video game music was how I experienced music. So I
Which
really started
extremely
from
shows through in your music now, the video game
yeah, well,
aspect.
yeah, it was a couple of years ago. I just decided to embrace that really because it really is the main um, kind of foundational influence to everything I write musically. So
Mhm.
that's when I started kind of going a bit more heavy handed with the video game references because I thought that would give even more uniqueness to my sound if I'm referencing like really specific events in specific video games.
Mhm.
Um, where did I start though? Yeah, about 2009, I opened GarageBand, and I
Okay.
didn't really get serious until I don't know 2011 or 12 or
Are there
something.
certain video games that really influenced like your beginning days of like, okay, like I really want to integrate this sound and this aspect of Foley from video games into what I'm writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pokemon Yellow was like my first
Yeah.
video game.
Okay.
Um, so my older brother just like gave me his old Game Boy with Pokemon Yellow, and that was kind of like when I started forming memories almost.
Mhm.
So like the music from that game, I mean, it's all just like square waves and triangle waves and stuff. Really, really simple sounds.
Mhm.
But the kind of I was amazed by the atmosphere they managed to create with the most basic sounds possible.
Absolutely.
Um, you listen to like the gym battle music from that game, and it's so intense with just square waves and just MIDI.
And that's it.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
I
and
noticed
that's always
i-
inspired me.
in a lot of your I've watched a lot of your tutorial videos, and I notice a lot of the times you really do just work with basic wave signs with a triangle wave or a square wave, and you still do that now with ARPs and such.
Yeah, I still have a love for square waves, particularly because they're just such a pure tone, and
Mhm.
they just got such a nice amount of like harmonics above the root note. So yeah, and it just cuts through things. And I mean, that's another kind of reference to the live experience, right?
Mhm.
Atonal sounds are great for just creating that wall of sound,
Yep.
but it's very difficult to differentiate between different atonal sounds. If you're using something tonal, it comes through so much clearer on a loud like speaker
System.
system.
Yeah.
Um, so that's another reason why I like that because you could play whatever like Bridham tune over and over and over again, or like into other tunes, and they're all gonna feel the kind of the same.
Hmm.
But as soon as you introduce melody, you've got,
It hits you like a
different
brick
emotions.
wall
Yeah, you've
in
got
in
different
a
emotions.
sound system. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and it cuts
Um,
through.
yeah. Oh, definitely. So Pokemon. Anyone else? I'm kind of into games. Boyfriend is very much so into games.
Yeah.
You will love this part.
Okay. I mean, I can go into specific like tunes of mine. I
Well,
don't
yeah.
know.
Give me a few tunes and what video games really inspired those.
Okay, so a really kind of obscure, nerdy reference is Wrong Warp. So Wrong Warp is
That was on your last EP with Disciple, correct?
one before that.
Yeah, the not the latest, the one before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a Wrong Warp is like a speedrunning technique.
Yep.
So speedrunning, anyone who doesn't know, trying to beat a game as quickly as possible. And there's various kind of different runs you can do. So you could do like 100%, where you do all the things you can in that game and complete it. Or you can do any percent, where it doesn't matter how much you complete, you just get to the credits. So a wrong warp is where you basically glitch a game to take you straight to the credits. That's usually what you're trying to do.
Oh wow.
Um,
I had no idea. That's so you're outsmarting the game.
Kind of, yeah.
Kinda. Okay, okay.
Well, it's any situation where you're you're being teleported, but to the wrong place.
Okay.
So the specific reference is in Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. Um, there's a very very cool method of this glitch, and you basically set things up like pixel perfect precision, and you kick this shell like the Koopa shell, and you fall down and the screen just melts and it goes all glitchy and crazy, and then you just see Mario do random stuff, and then you just end up at the credits. So
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
that's a cool idea for like a to theme a tune around.
Absolutely.
And when I'm making like video game inspired tunes, I like to kind of um, create a palette of ideas that I can draw from sonically.
Hmm.
So I grabbed some of the Super Mario Brothers sound effects, which
Yep.
are basically just complex MIDI playing with like square waves and stuff, and started messing around with those kind of sounds, and kind of glitched them even further. And I decided to combine that with the kind of new techniques I found with resonators.
Hmm.
Because I actually started that tune in Dallas, like the night after I'd just been hanging out with Ace and Millennial Trash.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
and they were showing me like how resonators work and stuff. And I was like, cool. So I'm
That's
going to
very
combine this
much so
new.
Asora's little signature that you can always
Exactly, yeah.
hear. Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to combine this new sound design technique with these kind of sound effects and focus on making the tune feel like you're being transported through an 8-bit game in an
Yeah.
incorrect
Oh,
way.
no,
uh,
that's great.
yeah, so that's kind of I really like kind of fleshing out tunes like that. Instead of just going, I'm going to make a dubstep tune, I want to go into it with, more of a kind of deeper theme behind it.
Absolutely. So when it comes to, because I know Wrong Warp was off the EP with Surface, and then what was that EP called on Disciple?
Interdimensional.
Interdimensional. Yes. And then that's the song with Asora, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. So when it comes to that one, and then your newest EP, which is Our Flame, are
Hmm.
these kind of cohesive EPs and bodies of work that you write together to flow, or do you more so kind of work on songs for a while and you're like, okay, I could see these together? Because I know a lot of artists do approach it differently.
It's mostly the latter, what you said. Like, it's mostly just, I'm always working on a number of projects,
Mm-hmm.
and at a certain point, maybe 2 tracks in, I go, okay, let's see how I can build an EP here. I think Our Flame is definitely the most kind of all over the place in terms of it kind of themes.
Well, it's very pushing. It's definitely a unique EP from Disciple.
Yeah, again, I'm really surprised that these labels keep taking this kind of
But it's so
melodic stuff.
different. No, like everybody can tell when your music's played. Everyone can. So it's like, and there's very few people who can do that successfully right now.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something I'm going for. So I'm
Hmm.
glad you think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, signature style is another thing that I find really really important, and I think we've lost quite a bit over the years with dubstep. I think the people who have managed to kind of grab kind of new flavors of the trends that are going on and combine it with what their signature style is and what they are as a person and
Hmm.
how they make music. I think it's those artists that I really respect the most. I'm thinking of like AU5, Eptic, Xylent, Fox
U5 is
Stevenson.
so talented. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
so because it's exciting in that way. You know, you can
absolutely.
kind of, if you go, oh, okay, AU5's made a rhythm tune, it's gonna be like, well, what the hell does that sound like?
Yeah.
You're already really interested to hear because you know he's gonna retain his own style, but try something that's kind of new and trendy.
Always bringing
Um,
something new to the table, but keeping kind of their foundation.
exactly, yeah. So that's definitely what I'm trying to do with my music as well. Always have a
I would
connecting
say
thread.
so far you've been pretty successful. I don't see, the arrow trending down anytime soon. You and AU5 just had a track released, correct, on Monstercat?
Yeah, yeah. Voidwalkers.
Was that in
Um,
a video game as well?
yeah, it was. It went up on Rocket League last week, which is really cool
Awesome.
because like
Yeah.
yeah, as soon as I found out that Rocket League had like Monstercat releases, I was like, oh, I could definitely do this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm also like a big fan of the game in general. I'm
Oh,
not very
that's so
good,
sick.
but
That has to be like an achievement, a personal achievement that has to be like, all right, I got my music in a game that I enjoy and that I like.
yeah, I mean, what one of my big things was I wanted to get music in a game on a Nintendo console. That was like a big thing for me. So,
Mhm.
and Rocket League's on the Switch, so
Yep, there you
that
go.
was yeah.
It's like two birds with one stone. No, I
Hmm.
because I've seen Monster Cat has quite a few deals with multiple video game companies that I've seen. Uh, Boyfriend just got the VR helmet, and one of
Oh
the
yeah,
VR games has a huge discography of Monster Cat songs, like
is it
older stuff.
Beat Saber?
Yes, yep, it's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one. Yep. Yeah, which I thought was very cool. It had Keizo on there and Terminite and pegboard nerds and just people who are very,
Hmm.
pivotal in that first time where bass music started to, come up and rise. So when did the Chime project actually start?
Yeah. So it was we just had the 5 year anniversary, I think. So
Okay.
it's like August 14th was when I first announced it 5 years ago.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. So that would be 2015. So from
Yeah.
2011 to 2015, were you honing your craft? Were you running under different project names?
Yeah. So I started making music as just myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I really was pretty terrible to begin with.
I
But
think
I first
everybody is
started.
when they start.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I first started my first like serious project with my cousin, which was Caution and Crisis.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so and
Does
our
music
first
like
kind of
run in your family?
not really, no. But yeah, my cousin's always been pretty musical as well. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, so we started by making drum and bass really, and our kind of first taste of success was we did a couple of Minecraft remixes that got really popular on YouTube.
Oh, that's sick.
Um, I also did like a series of DJ tutorials, like beginner mixing for dubstep kind of DJ tutorials, and they kind of picked up from there. Yeah, and then I kind of went to university and I started making a lot more music just on my own. So that's
Mm-hmm.
when December came along. Uh, yeah. without the three initially, and then I added the three later, so I would come up on Google.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, and then it was drum and bass for a bit still, and then I kind of made the switch to dubstep probably in about 2013, 2012, that sort of time.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, really, it was artists like Xylent and Seven Lions and those kind of guys that kind of gave me um, the idea really to move to dubstep, because I was kind of afraid of the sound design thing at the time. I was more into writing kind of
Yeah,
just
absolutely. More
music.
composition, period.
Yeah. So yeah, and I saw what they could do with really melodic tunes and still have that kind of impact that I really enjoyed from dubstep. So I was like, I'm gonna give that a go, and that's really where the shift happened. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then December, kind of started picking up more of a following through like EDM.com
Hmm.
and dubstep.net and those kind of
Did you do
platforms.
any major releases with December, or was that still kind of when you were, honing your craft, figuring out what you wanted to be per se, or was this like a complete project on your own where you just kind of pursued it for a very long time and then said, okay, I want to start something new, and that's when you came to Chime?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chime really was. It was mostly just a name change, to be honest. It wasn't like,
Okay.
okay, I'm changing alias to go in a different direction.
Hmm.
So really, I would count all of the December tunes as part of the Chime project almost.
Okay.
Yeah, it really was just. It just got to a point where I'd come in contact with my management, and it was looking like we could get like a firepower release, which was quite a big deal back then.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I gotta do something about this name before, like,
December's rough. That's a potentially
yeah,
rough name to get up there in Google search engine per se.
exactly. And the three
The
stuff was
three.
just
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's why I started Chime, and yeah, just kind of kept
No.
going really.
Sick. No, that's awesome. So you're really kind of building on your discography all along. And you see that a lot. A lot of people from the consumer standpoint don't realize how many artists do a rebrand, whether they change their name or don't change their name, and they just, change an icon or an image, or kind of go in a
Hmm.
new trajectory genre wise, and it just sticks. And it's like they've
Yeah,
had so many times beforehand, whether, all of those other factors changed or not. And then you get something, and it just sticks.
yeah. I mean, like Voltra is a really good example of that. She's seemingly come out of nowhere.
Wonderful.
But she has had like previous aliases
Yeah.
that I think she's keeping pretty secret.
Yeah.
But I think like 4 or 5 different aliases beforehand. So yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes I'll go down someone's SoundCloud like
Hmm.
too far.
Yeah.
Um, and
Too far. Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting to see like where people started off, or like you can literally go back to like the first track, like Seven
I've done
Lions is
that
an
as
example of
well.
that.
And
Like
people
the
just keep them
first Seven
up,
Lions track.
especially on
Mm.
SoundCloud. On SoundCloud, you can usually go all the way back, because I know some people clean up their Spotify per se as time changes and they go in a different direction. But the most success I've found on that is like even on huge people like Rez and such. The first song is still up from
Yeah.
X amount of years ago, and it's very
Mhm.
cool to see the progression.
Yeah, definitely. So that's, yeah, it's quite a humbling thing as well. I think, especially if you're an artist that's coming up, um, knowing that you're already past a certain point from an artist that you like currently,
Mhm.
um, can be quite like motivating for sure.
Absolutely. So, at what point in your project with Chime did you think, hey, I want to make a label to give other artists who have this same vision in mind with, uh, different uh, kind of factors here and there, like Asor and Paper Skies and Caval, and they all kind of bring something different to the table. Was Rushdown always something you wanted to create, or was one day you were like, all right, I want to bring something new to the table that's associated with Chime?
Yeah, well, really, I kind of stumbled into it. My manager said, "Hey, why don't we start our own label so that you know, your more melodic stuff or the things that, you know, bigger labels aren't necessarily going to take, we can just self-release them.
That way you own all the rights to it. You know,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
beneficial part.
Um, yeah, and I kind of got a bit too ambitious with it, and I was like, why don't we invite like all of my producer friends to release on it as well? So that's where it started, and it was just releasing whatever the bigger labels wouldn't take from my friends, really. Um,
Absolutely.
and it was about, I guess, a year and a half in where I was like, I wasn't really happy with it, and it was kind of stressing me out. So I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to rethink this. What I feel the scene needs right now is a place for like upcoming melodic producers to go, because I
There's no
saw,
label for it. There's no label
yeah,
for
I
what
mean,
you
I saw
release.
it. Well, it's interesting because like old Never Say Die was super melodic. You had people
Hmm.
like 501 on there that were basically making color bass.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and they just started dropping off those artists, or artists started moving to the heavier stuff. So I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool if I could start to cultivate the more melodic side and keep that going. Um, so that's when I rebranded Rushdown and then started, you know, um, going for more of that direction. And yeah, it's just kind of picked up a bit more speed over and over again. And really, I'm not, you know, I'm not aiming for Rushdown to be a disciple or a Never Say Die or something like that. It's
Hmm.
really, you know, 100% to help smaller artists and kind of introduce them to the bigger labels and really just give them a rung on the
It's a
ladder that they can.
huge bridge right now because you see
Mm,
some of the artists that you've given them their first signings, like Popcon, like Asora. You know, these kids are just taking off not even a few years later. And you know, and it's insane. It's really, really, really awesome. And you're introducing and giving just kind of a platform and a household for this subgenre of music that really didn't exist before.
yeah, and it's exciting because, you know, we are always like talking and sharing ideas and sharing
Hmm.
our own music, and you know, collaborating within the roster. So I've
It's
kind
like a
of
collective as
unknowingly,
well, where you
yeah,
guys bounce
exactly.
things off of each other.
I've kind of unknowingly created a little corner of the dubstep scene, really. And it's interesting that, you know, Asora came along and he kind of introduced his sort of methods of bringing tonality into, you know, kind of
Hmm.
rhythm basses and stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, that bounced throughout the entire Rushdown roster, and then, you know, everyone's kind of started doing their own take on it, and it's sort of become its own new kind of style of music, which, you know, we kind of call melodic rhythm. You know, I don't want to get bogged down with
Yeah, no, no, you're gonna
whether it counts or whatever, but
shout out
it's,
EDM Twitter, whatever.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's got influence from rhythm and influence from like melodic dubstep.
It's like a
Wherever it sits on that scale, we don't really care.
reinventation. It's like fashion, how the things that were popular 10 years ago are popular now, but just in a different way. And
Yeah,
and I feel
exactly. Yeah.
like that's what you guys have successfully done at your label. Is there anything cool coming up, like a compilation or some more EPs? Who are some guys who you really want us to watch coming out of the label right now?
Okay. Well, I'm actually just taking like a short break from the label stuff.
Okay.
Because we just absolutely
Oh, it's
slammed
been
everything.
rolling. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we just released an EP from Similar Outskirts that's like
Banging.
really just like one of my favorite EPs of this year. Every tune is based on a different legendary Pokemon,
Oh
which is just right
no
up my street
way.
anyway.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we released an EP from Caval, EP from Kill and Void as well.
Killing
Yeah,
Void's
and just,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Phenomenal.
And what's really cool is, you know, I'm seeing these artists like Sharks and Asora and Millennial Trash just kind of going onto the higher labels a little bit, and
But they're
uh,
gonna, just like
yeah,
you, they're gonna start to kind of lead the path where there's gonna be kids now who are gonna start to follow Ace and start to follow Sharks, and it's just gonna get
exactly,
bigger
yeah.
and bigger and bigger.
And I'm really glad because that was, you know, I was trying to keep the melodic stuff alive completely on my own. It felt like, as more of those artists kind of ditched that style.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was kind of, I got to a point where I realized I would need to start bringing up other smaller artists with me to really cultivate that part of the scene and have any chance of it remaining a part of dubstep, basically. Um, so yeah, but like coming up, we're gonna have Color Base Volume 2 in December, probably at the end of the year.
Sick.
And we're starting to collect releases for that. And
Awesome.
also New Colors Volume 2, which is going to be all new artists to the roster.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
yeah.
I feel
So,
like there's kids every day who are just so inspired by this subgenre who are learning to make it. And it's cool.
yeah, well, that's the exciting thing, is that I've started to get to the point where people are trying to sound like Chime, which
Hmm.
is really interesting, because like I saw artists like Zomboy become like kind of introduce a brand new sound, and then everyone was like trying to sound like Zomboy, and everyone was trying to sound
The
like Must
wave, the
Die.
trend.
Yeah, so it's exciting to have that happen to my own music, and like Ace Aura and everyone else who's kind of doing this new kind of colorful sound.
Absolutely. And I
Really
feel
cool.
like things like you having your Patreon and other things with these guys really going in depth, especially over this time with the pandemic, into how you guys do it. Because all someone has to have is internet, and they can figure
Hmm.
out the way that you're, going about your structure and going about your sound design, and then they have to adapt it and make it their own, of course. But it's really cool because I feel like a lot of the bigger guys who are running on that same platform don't necessarily do that. You're not going to see Zomboy
Yeah.
or Eptic breaking down how they do absolutely everything on YouTube.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I've always kind of, I haven't really been secretive with my ideas at
Which
all.
is something that I think is very exclusive to EDM, because I come from
Mm.
the metal post-hardcore world, and it's very much so like, hey, you want to learn how to do this? Like, let me teach you, let me show you. And then you come over to EDM and everybody's acts like it's a secret. Like, I'm not going to show you how I process my kick. I'm not going to show you how I do this or do
Yeah.
that. And I love that people like you are like, hey, like, everybody should know this. there's
Mm.
there's nothing that's not your right to learn this if you're not willing to invest the time.
Yeah, I mean, really my goal is to bring what I like about dubstep out and keep that alive and put it out into the world. um if I just held on to everything, I don't think we would have much of this shift now, more to kind of tonal stuff.
Absolutely not.
um yeah, and I'm very envious of producers that are coming up now in comparison to like 2010
When
when I
you
I first
were
started, because
I
there's
can't even
there's
imagine.
yeah, I mean, there wasn't Splice, there wasn't any good tutorials. Like the producers that were really big still had terrible mix down in a lot of cases at that point.
Hmm.
But now there's so many tools, and you can book one-on-one tuition sessions with producers,
Absolutely.
which is great. And I do that too, and it's really interesting to be in a position where I know all this stuff now, and I can just tell I can just tell
Just
it to
teach
people.
it. Yeah. And it makes you a
Um,
better producer too when you're able to
yeah,
reiterate what you know to someone else.
yeah. I hated that kind of mystery that was behind everything. And like when I went to university, I studied popular music production was the name of the course.
Okay.
They kind of forgot to teach me how to produce music.
Oh
There was
boy.
a lot of kind of elitism and discouragement about like electronic dance music
Hmm.
there, and a lot of kind of just, rather than teaching, just trying to look cool, which was really
Which
unhelpful.
is
There's a lot
so
of
not the
misinformation.
right thing.
Yeah, there'd be situations where we'd be, I don't know, compressing a kick drum, and they would be like, "Oh, can you hear? Oh, can you hear that sounds? See what that's
Oh
doing there?" And
my.
it's like, it's on bypass, mate. You're not doing
You're
anything
not
to
doing
the
anything.
sound.
You're not doing shit. Oh.
So it was really difficult to get like full concrete information on, what is correct to do. I thought mastering was this incredible mystical process, and then I sort of found out that that was kind of a lie
You have to do
told
hardly
by.
nothing. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, like that's how mastering engineers stay in a job, is they kind of make out like it's some magic art form, when really
Yeah.
it's making it loud without messing the mix down at.
Absolutely. And now there's
Yeah.
VSTs that literally do it for you, per se.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. So
crazy.
yeah, it's great to kind of, demystified all that that knowledge and be able to just funnel it straight to people
I just feel like the
through
next
my tuition
decade
and stuff.
is going to be just very interesting for bass music in general. And I
Mm.
feel like it's not a coincidence that this subgenre of music kind of came to light during quarantine. Do you? Because people are at
Hmm.
home and all of that stuff, and again, kind of what I said earlier, it's not so much going out to clubs and hearing the same thing over and over again. People are just searching for new stuff. It's kind of like going down the SoundCloud like black hole.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing too. Like, if you're making music solely for the live experience, I mean, sure, it might like kick ass live,
Mm-hmm.
but it's gonna maybe not have the depth for like home listening. And generally, there are a ton of people who like listening to heavy stuff at home and in their car and stuff. But I think that there's more of a focus on home listening for like, more kind of in-depth stuff. And that kind of goes hand in hand with, more melodic influence and that sort of thing, writing more like songs rather than, um, you know, DJ tools almost.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so I guess that might have been a factor as to why it's gaining a bit of popularity. I know, there are a couple labels right now that are behind the scenes preparing more melodic stuff and pushing their artists to move more to that towards,
Which is huge, which is a huge step.
specifically during like the pandemic and stuff. Which is interesting. It's interesting that
Right.
we needed a pandemic for that shift to happen.
Right. Oh, good
um
lord. Like
yeah,
a
I
silver
don't know.
silver lining.
Yeah.
So Excision brought you as a starlight artist to Bass Canyon last year, correct?
Mhm.
It's coming. It was you and
Yeah.
Jessica and Yuki
Mm.
and I believe one other. I cannot remember
Oh, it
who
was
it
a
was.
bunch of people. It was Uber, um, Jansen, Tynan, yeah, and those guys you mentioned.
Just
I might be missing someone,
incredibly
but yeah,
innovative producers. How
Calcium is
how
the
did
other
that Calcium? Yes. How did that feel? Were you just like, holy shit? Like, did your management reach out to you and you were like, yeah, he reached out to us? Da 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 da.
Well, okay. Well, it was interesting because so we were planning a tour for that time
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and we were going to start with around Base Canyon time and finish with like Lost Lands time and
Yeah,
just see if those two kind of come
coincided.
to the head.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the Base Canyon thing, um, I was actually staying at my booking agent's place when that was kind of happening and getting booked and getting announced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so he was basically like, nah, you haven't been booked or whatever. But I was on the spotlight, and then we saw on the release that it was Excision plus spotlight artists back to back, and we were like, ooh, okay,
Oh my gosh. You're
we're
like,
one of
I
those.
don't know. We're one of those. Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we haven't got the booking. I've got nothing through. So I was like, okay, I guess it's going to be some of the other spotlight artists or
Mm-hmm.
something. So I went ahead and accepted an invite to one of my mates' weddings at Oxford University,
Oh
which is
boy.
basically Hogwarts, if you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, on that weekend. Um, so I was like, okay, I'll just do that, and then a
Yeah.
week after, I'll go and start the tour and finish up with Lost Lands. So then, like months later, we got the email through saying, "Hey, you're going to be one of the back to back. You're going to be on the back to back with Excision." And I was like, "Okay, cool, but shit though,"
Yeah.
because
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Okay, so technically, the wedding is on a Friday. Oh wait, the wedding was on a Saturday, and the back to back was on a Sunday, but it is
Can
halfway
I
across
do
the
it?
world."
Can I do it?
Technically, I could. So, yeah, I managed it basically.
Oh my
I went
gosh.
to the wedding. I went to the wedding party, and then I ducked out fairly early to get like 5 hours sleep or something.
Absolutely.
And then I got a monumental taxi to the airport. Flew to Seattle. Got to the hotel for like 5 minutes.
How long was the flight?
It's like 11
Yeah,
hours.
that's a
No,
pretty
wait,
long flight.
9, 10 hours or something like that. There wasn't time to sleep.
Oh my.
You know, the reason why I couldn't sleep was because they took ages at security for some reason. I don't know what it was, but it was just like not enough staff or something,
Yeah.
which took like a full hour and a half that I could have been sleeping at the hotel.
Oh.
So yeah, I arrived at the hotel and I was like, I've got 40 minutes until I'm being picked up to be taken to Base Canyon, and it's a 3-hour drive from Seattle because it's in the middle of nowhere in Washington State. Yeah, so the whole thing felt very surreal. I mean, partially because it was surreal, and partially because I was very sleep deprived.
What a 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Not
so, yeah, so it was difficult to concentrate, and I was just like meeting all these artists and stuff, and I was like,
oh yeah,
hey, I'm gonna immediately apologize for being super tired. But yeah, it was mad. It was crazy. It was interesting to see dubstep come so far from these these tiny clubs in the UK to a
thousands
gorge
of
in the
people.
middle of
Oh
Washington
my
State, in the
gosh.
middle of nowhere, with thousands of people. So yeah,
And I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. I think there's going to be more bass infused festivals and just kind of more bass artists taking on the main stage and such moving forward in the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, we have Excision to thank for that. He is an absolute businessman.
Shout out Subsidia, the new label.
Yeah,
you had a track with Hella Sex, correct, on his new label? Yeah, which is phenomenal. And I've never seen an artist of that caliber do what he did for the people who he decided to pick up their songs for Subsidia.
Yeah. I mean, that's a statement. 120
like
tunes.
Yeah. And to put that together as someone who runs a label yourself is just mad. Is just crazy. Yeah. And he has a team, but his team isn't even that big, And when we were contacted, I had a song with Prismatic, who's AU5's roommate. On the compilation, and when we were contacted, we were like, okay, maybe it'll be like a Lost Lands compilation, kind of like he's done the years prior. And then when we saw the 120 tracks, I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, did you find out with everyone else with the announcement?
Yeah, oh absolutely. We had no idea.
Because we had to sign like NDAs and everything.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, I didn't know how many people it's going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be on Rotten, his old label, or Excision Music or whatever. Yeah, and nobody knew.
They did a pretty good job of keeping it under wraps for how many people were completely involved when it comes down to their teams, the actual artists, like all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So
crazy.
Yeah,
I feel like that will pioneer a lot of events in the future. I can't see him going forward and not doing either, a Subsidia takeover stage at Lost Lands, or a festival in itself, or takeovers kind of like how Deadbeats do their takeovers in different places, across the states. It'll be really cool to see what he does.
Yeah, I think it only makes sense, especially like during the pandemic. I mean, that was kind of the message they opened with. It was like, well, we can't throw a big old festival, so what's like the next best thing? Let's start a label. I mean, it's kind of surprising that Excision hasn't done this earlier. I guess this was just a good time to do it. Now that he can't focus on like the festival.
Definitely blew it out of the water. Definitely an entrance for sure as a label.
Yeah. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, no, oh, absolutely. Was playing Couchlands exciting for you to be at that set time and have, X amount of thousands of people watching? It's very different virtually.
I really played it down beforehand because I was like, I was actually going away for a trip the day, like a couple of days before the deadline, and I was like really busy up until that point.
Yeah.
And I had to record it,
Hmm.
and um, yeah, and I was just like putting the mix together within like 24 hours, and then I was just like, I just gotta
I got to do it.
record it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's fine. Um, yeah, and I have a camera that only records for like 15 minutes at a time,
Oh
which is
no.
really annoying.
Oh
Um,
no.
so I have to like pick really good moments to go and like start a new recording on the camera. Um, so yeah, it was a bit rushed, but I ended up like pretty happy with how the mix was in
Now,
the
did you
final
have to
product.
do it in front of a green screen to do what
I
they did with the
so
background?
I do have a green screen, but they said like a white background would be fine. So like
Oh,
this is
there you
pretty
go.
white. Yeah, but it is tough because this isn't a huge room, and
No.
it needed to be like fully white background with just me. Um, so yeah, it was a bit frantic. um,
Well, you got
so
it
yeah,
done. It went well, I would like to say. It was great traction running into your release with Subsidia.
yeah, exactly. I didn't even know it was a Subsidia takeover at that point as well.
Right?
Um,
Way to just
yeah,
drop it at the end of day one. Oh, hey, here's a label. Tomorrow's Subsidia takeover. We're going to be playing in this massive Subsidia city. And
yeah,
because the visuals were insane. The visuals were
yeah.
insane.
I mean, yeah, Excision's team are always
Unreal.
gonna kill it on the visuals, really.
So you've had
Yeah.
such an output of music this year, which, seems right with the momentum as well as, going into a pandemic with no shows. Do you have any more music before the end of this year scheduled?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So,
Awesome.
I mean, this month's gonna be a little quiet because we just had the
Oh, you just had an
AU5 tune
EP and an AU5,
and
yeah.
the Subsidia tune as well. Although I do have a drum and bass tune that's actually back from the Caution and Crisis days, like
Oh,
2011,
wow.
that I've kind of remastered and remade from the ground up. Um, that I may be putting out on Rushdown.
Sick.
But for the rest of the year, I'm featuring on an album.
Awesome.
I guess it's announced, isn't it? Technically. Um, I'm featuring on Flux Pavilion's album with our
Oh,
collab, which I think is
ah,
uh,
that's very exciting.
probably
That's
the biggest collab I'll ever do.
that's that's huge.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I think that's in November,
Oh, good for
and
you.
yeah, and also it's looking likely that the Pixel Terror and Temanite like three-way collab
Hmm.
is going to be out before the end of the year.
That'll be
Um,
sick.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's been very highly anticipated by like each of our
Pixel
fan
Tear is
bases.
wonderful.
Hmm.
Wonderful. No, that's going to be so awesome. Flux has always been a huge supporter of you, though, right? What was one of the first labels you really seriously worked with, Circus?
Yeah, well, I'd say like Firepower originally was where I first the first like main label that I
Hmm.
started working with. So I did like two EPs on there, and then a third one after like a month after my first Circus EP.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it was interesting because I just woke up to a message from Dr. P on Twitter being like, "Hey, how's it going? We really like your stuff. Give us an EP." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." Um, yeah, which was mind blowing really at the time.
Which is sick.
Um,
Yes.
and what I liked about those EPs with Circus is that like I could really embrace um, the kind of more fun, kind of silly, fun side of my music.
Yes.
Um, whereas like with Firepower, I was always trying to give it that kind of heavier, darker edge
Most
to kind of fit
definitely.
in with their releases. But Circus, I was just like, let's go full, just fun, melodic, wobbly UK tunes.
Which is a great introduction to your project.
Yeah, I think those two EPs, Experience Points and Evolve, are definitely like two of my favorite EPs I've put out.
Evolve's great.
Um,
Evolve's
thank
one
you.
of my favorite of yours. Yeah. Yeah. No,
um,
wonderful. So for people and producers coming up in the scene, whether they've kind of dabbled their feet in the water or not, what would just be some advice that you give them just to leave off on?
yeah, I mean, I think my go-to advice is always don't expect to get like really good at producing quickly. It takes a long time. I think with DJing, and you can pick that up fairly
So
quickly.
quickly.
Especially in comparison to producing.
Mm-hmm.
Producing is just, and it's difficult to teach like mix down, because your ideas can be great, and I've always been like pretty happy with my ideas, and that's why I go back and like remaster tunes, like I just mentioned.
Yep.
But really, it is like mix down and that kind of quality that is needed for people to start really paying attention to your stuff, and for you to get like bigger releases on labels. So really, that should be your main focus in improvement right from the start, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I feel like, especially from my standpoint too, it's like composition is so much of it, because at the end of the day, you want a song to have a good song and have musicality and catchiness and a hook and what have you. But I feel like the mix down can make or break whether it's listenable.
Yeah, and it's what takes the longest to get good at.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest thing to teach, because you're learning to train your ears to hear what's wrong in as you're producing, and that's really difficult to hear if you're just not experienced enough with producing.
Absolutely. And I feel like that just comes with time. Like I feel like it's something that just like can't be rushed for your ears to start to go to that musical standpoint, and just instead of just a listener consumer standpoint.
Yeah, that really is the biggest grind. But you will eventually hit a point where you stop cringing at your old stuff, because like in the early years, I would look back at stuff from even like a month or 2 months ago and go, I've got to, I've learned so much in this period. But yeah, eventually it does get to the point where you can play stuff from years ago and still be happy with how it's sounding. You always improve. There's always bits of improvement, but I think it's kind of an inverse exponential curve with mixdown. You improve really, really rapidly, and then like you get to a point where it's good. It's a good mixdown, and everything from there is like
very minute,
tiny little improvements. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I greatly appreciate it. You
no
have
problem.
Such a bright future ahead of you for all the work you've put in. I'm so excited to see what happens with Rushdown and where all of these artists are, not even 2-3 years from now. I can just see it. Like I guarantee you, I would bet money that a lot of these kids are going to be thrown on to the talent buying side of things and playing shows, because people are going to want to hear that kind of music.
I hope so. They definitely deserve it, I would say.
Absolutely. So Chime, everyone. Thank you, Harvey, for coming on. This is the XO podcast, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Bye.